Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Seed World Strategy webinar. My name is Alex Martin, and I serve as the editor for Seed World. And today I'm absolutely happy to be your host. 2023 is in full swing. Though it's not really time for New Year's resolutions anymore, we're hoping today might help all of you with a couple of different goals you might have to better yourself and better your team. Today, we're going to dive right into a topic called, Does your management style suit your team? As we navigate through the constantly evolving world, it's crucial for managers to adapt their leadership styles to suit their team's needs. With baby boomers transitioning out of the workforce and Gen Z taking their place, it's really essential to start exploring how to manage diverse teams effectively. The pandemic brought about significant changes in the way we as businesses operate, and managers need to be equipped with the right tools to lead their teams during these challenging times. As a team manager, it's crucial to ask yourself, does my management style suit my team? So during today's webinar, we're going to explore a couple of key learning points. We're going to hopefully discover the way you run your management style, the influence culture has on teams, and how to lead during changing times. I'd also like to let you know that today's webinar is being recorded, and it's going to be available at seedworld.com a little bit later this week. And also during the panel, we'd really like to encourage everyone to ask questions when you have them. I'll be sure to filter those to our panelists during our discussion. Now, let's go ahead and bring in our expert panel. Today, I'd like to present our three panelists. Jonathan Shaver, who is president and owner of Envision Partners, LLC. Jake Ware, who is business manager for HM Claus and chair of ASTA's lead committee. And Rhonda Werner, who is director of people and culture of Ag One Source. Jonathan, Jake, and Rhonda, thank you so much for joining me today to help the seed sector learn how to better manage their teams. I figured today we could start with some very brief introductions before we dive into our questions. So, Jonathan, I'll let you start. Can you introduce yourself and a little bit about Envision Partners?
Thank you, Alex, very much for the invitation today. This is a really critical topic, particularly for new managers or managers of new teams. And I've been a leadership coach in the seed industry now for 12 years. And my specific niche with coaching and leadership development and management development is in this specific transition of becoming a new manager or a manager of new teams.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Jake, we'll go ahead and let you take it away for your next introduction as well.
Thanks, Alex. Appreciate you having me here. First of all, it's nice to see you again. A little bit about me. So my role at HM Claus is called business manager, which essentially means I'm running a portion of the business as it relates to sales and product development. So currently I lead a team of sales reps and product development reps, some people that do both. And we're focused, the business we do is focused on our direct sales. So we sell seed to like vegetable freezers and canners, and they really want the right genetic to give them the right product for their customers. We sell directly to them on that. My responsibilities within LEAD. So first of all, LEAD stands for Leadership, Education, and Development. So I'm the chair of this committee, and we focus on really bringing leadership content to mid to high level leaders. And also we do a lot of work with students and really helping them with their next steps. What we do is fairly conference focused. So ASTA has, a few different conferences that they provide for their members. And in fact, right now we're working very heavily on the Leadership Summit, which is happening in Sacramento in June. So just a quick shameless plug, anyone that's looking for leadership training and you're in the seed industry, it really doesn't get any better than this because, you look at, you want to be able to have this leadership training and having something that's really catered to your industry is something that is really quite valuable. So on top of that, a shout out to any students in the Sacramento area. We are designing additional content that's catered specifically for you and also having a job fair there. So sorry, Alex, shameless plug, but it's a little bit about me and what we're working on right now.
No, thanks, Jake. I feel like that's an important thing to take note of in the coming months. I mean, June is only about 2 months away. Rhonda, I'll let you kick it off with our very final introduction.
Perfect. Thanks again for having me today. So I'm Rhonda Werner. I am with Ag One Source. So we are professional and executive recruiters specifically for the ag industry. I have been here for 16 years, primarily as a recruiter for our clients. But the last couple of years, I've really focused on our own internal hiring and really digging into what our culture is and how we not only hire for behavioral styles for the roles that we're looking for, but also hiring on our culture. Because I feel like it's really two separate pieces of the puzzle. So
amazing. Thank you so much, Rhonda. I guess with that, let's go ahead and dive into some questions. I figured today we could start with a question directed to all three of you. I figured we could go in the order that we just went in, Jonathan, Jake, and then finally ending with Rhonda. But I'd love to get our minds kicked into gear for this topic. How have you seen the world of business, and more specifically, the world of management, change over the last few years? Jonathan, I'll give you the mic first.
All right. Well, in your introduction, Alex, you mentioned a few of them, is that we do have a new generation of a workforce coming through. And sometimes we overplay that. I think that we were all new generation at some point. And I think the big change would be that there's a great desire for purpose-driven work that has an impact to things that are important to the employee and that are larger than the individual. And I don't think agriculture is short of having mission and purpose. And this is something we really need to take the opportunity as an industry, but as a manager, I think also finding ways to connect the day-to-day work to a larger purpose and a larger impact is an important change in how we lead and manage employees.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Jake, I'll let you take it next.
First of all, I think that's a good point, Jonathan. Well put. And with this, you mentioned the workplace changed somewhat through the pandemic with remote versus in person, and we're trying to find our way here. There's definitely change there. Everybody sees that. Everybody understands that. I would add to that we have market instability right now within the seed industry. We have market movement to these consumers. We've had inventory issues within the food chain. We've had consumer preference changes due to inflation. Also, we've seen weather events that really affect our business, and it's dealing with this instability. I'd say it's more unstable than it used to be. And on top of that, I would add that now we have artificial intelligence on the forefront, and this it will change many, many things. And it's something that leaders really need to be looking at and understanding. How will this affect our specific business?
Yeah, those are great points to add, Jake. Thank you so much. And Rhonda, I'll give you the last word on this question.
yeah, I mean, similar thoughts to everybody else. I mean, moving to a remote management style, I think has been challenging for a lot of people, right? So there's that component that people are really getting used to. And again, it's the generational thing and the people who are coming up and how they want to be managed, but really how they want to be motivated, right? Kind of like Jonathan said earlier, a lot of the younger generation, it's really a passion for what they do. It's not just a job, right? So it's being able to really understand what's going to motivate those folks. And it's very different than what it was 20 years ago. So it's just really stepping back, looking at some of the changes and how to adapt.
Thank you so much, Rhonda. Now, Jake, we kind of talked a little bit about this, but I figured this is still a good question to ask you. What would you say are some of those causes for these management trend shifts? I mean, we've seen lots of things happen. We mentioned there's shifting workforces, there's shifting business practices, there's just lots of things on the change. What would you say are some of the root causes?
Yeah, I think technology obviously is a big part of that. The pandemic thrusted us into technology faster than we were planning, which is okay. But I think we've learned a lot from that, right? Where what works and really what doesn't. I think we've really found that out through the process. I think the other side is it gets you thinking about work in general and what are we hiring people for. So it allows us, it kind of allowed us to open up and start to ask these questions again. So an example of that would be, am I hiring somebody just to do a job, right? It doesn't matter how long it takes them, but it's just a job that needs to be done. So maybe it takes them 3 days a week to be able to do that. Are we okay with that? And versus, being a standard 5-day week. On the other side, are we hiring somebody that needs to be there 8 to 5 every day to be available for problems to be solved? And really, there's really no cap in the work that they can be doing. And both of these are perfectly acceptable. And they're just different. So as a leader, you have to look and understand, what do I really need from this person? And both of these philosophies, I think, are perfectly fine. And on top of that, I think you still have these generational cultural differences that we see, and also kind of the evolution of leadership, and then how that plays, into our daily activities.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jake. I think we're really going to dive into some of those points that you made a little bit later in our conversation, but I love that you mentioned there are things like the evolution of leadership and technology really influencing it. Jonathan, you have worked with a few different companies. What are some different management styles you typically see in the workplace?
Typical management styles, I would say that there isn't. I think we see all the different management styles. We might call some of them directive, pace setting, more hands-off, laissez-faire. You see empathetic and supportive kinds of management styles, democratic, consensus level, right? So they all exist, and just to name some of them, and that might resonate with some of our viewers today, those particular names and titles. I think that it's not necessarily the style that you have. We all have a default management style, the place that we start. It's really the key is knowing that style and then being able to flex our style to the situation, to match the people that we're leading or we're trying to influence, or the situation that it called for. And so flexing in the short term to match the situation, and being aware of what our management style is and knowing whether or not it's the right one for the particular situation.
Sure. I think that makes a lot of sense, Jonathan. And I think we're going to probably get into talking a little bit about flexibility. Rhonda, we're talking about managing so many different personalities. How do you go about creating your team's culture? And actually, I'm sorry, I jumped a little bit ahead of myself, Rhonda. I would like to change my question.
Go right ahead.
Sorry about that. I know one of the big things in leadership and management styles can influence is your company culture. Why does your management style affect that so much?
I think it really goes into, does the company itself, have they defined their true company culture? And are they hiring people based on that? A lot of times companies want to hire solely based on somebody's prior experiences or successes, right? And that's part of it. Sometimes there are managers who talk the talk of what the company culture is, but they don't actually walk the walk. So a new employee may come in thinking they're getting one thing, but the management style is totally different and sometimes even goes totally against the company culture, right? So, the statistic is that 75% of workers change a job because of their manager. So that style and how they, how they embrace the company culture and then, move that down through the employees is critical, right? If it's not what they thought they were signing up for, it can be very, very detrimental. So, it's really important to hire not only on somebody's success and what they can bring, but also, are they really going to fit our company culture? Because things can be toxic if not, whether that's from a manager or an employee.
Sure. That's a pretty big stat. Jake, I kind of wanted to follow up with that a little bit with you, because I know you're a manager and you're someone who works with young leaders and old leaders across the country. What's your recommendation when you find your team isn't quite gelling with your style?
Sure. Yeah. First, I would say that there's really no optimum, as I think Jonathan said quite well. There's not one optimum management style for all situations. So this is going to happen to anybody. So if they're not gelling, as you put it, with your style, I think the first thing you need to understand is what is it they're not that's not working. And quite frankly, I believe in communication. So to figure this out, you really do need to ask them, try to understand, what it is. So you could, maybe have one-on-one. You mean, don't make it awkward in front of a big group, but have one-on-one. Maybe you have a leader kind of within your own team. That's a great person to reach out to. Also, I've done the Korn Ferry survey, 360 leadership process. This is a great way to do it anonymously, where they can actually do a survey of your leadership and provide some comments and help you understand. Now, fair warning, especially with the anonymous ones, there's going to be some things in there that sting a little, and that's okay. That's kind of the point, right? You're trying to figure out what is it that I'm doing wrong, and it's one of the big things that I think we struggle with in general is we think we're perceived one way when actually we're perceived another way. And if we can understand that, it's really, really critical and valuable to be able to begin working on that, because we can be quite blind to it. So if we're able to do this, I think it can be quite helpful. So and then how do you fix these things? You should have mentors. If you don't have mentors, get mentors and talk to them. You can reach out to great people like Jonathan that specialize in helping with these things. Also, there's like right now I'm at the UC Davis Graduate School of Management, and we're working on these things specifically. The last thing I would recommend is read. There's so many books out there, so much content specifically catered to good leadership. If you're not a reader of books, Audible, you can just figure out these, who writes these books and look at YouTube content, whatever, however you can get that information. It really is critical. And lastly, I'd say you have to be honest with your team. Talk to them about these things. I promise you they will appreciate it, because they really want you to grow just as much as you want to grow.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jake. I love that you mentioned getting a mentor. I feel like that's maybe one thing people forget, is that you don't have to do it alone. You can get advice from your peers, from people you look up to, and things like that.
For sure.
Awesome. Rhonda, we're going to go back to my company culture question that I started asking you a few minutes ago. But, while we're managing so many different personalities, how do you really go about creating your team's culture? You talked about the right personalities can make it great, and the wrong personalities can make it a little difficult to manage. How do you go about making that, and why should it matter in the long run?
Yeah, well, I think there's two key parts to it, right? It's understanding yourself as a manager and understanding your team. I think Jake mentioned some assessments. We do some assessments with our clients as well that really dig into that, understanding those behavioral styles and how you come across as a manager. And again, sometimes it's asking those questions and getting that feedback that sometimes hurts, right, as to what your team is thinking and how you come across to them. So the first part, I think, is just really understanding how everybody on your team ticks, right? Not everybody's going to communicate the same. Not everybody's going to learn the same way. So you as a manager need to be adaptable to that team, because we're not going to hire a bunch of clones and everybody's going to be exactly the same, right? But from a cultural standpoint, it's really understanding what that is. What are your core values? Do the people on your team resonate with those core values? Is there an individual that's way off in left field on something in particular? Is that a conversation you can have? But you have to kind of understand what the values are for your company, and the team normally goes hand in hand with that too. But understanding those styles and being able to adapt to managing them, as well as, again, hiring on those core values. If you're not hiring someone that believes in the same things you do, probably going to be difficult from a management standpoint.
Sure. Awesome. Thank you so much, Rhonda. And Jake, another question for you. We talked about not gelling with your team, being a little bit flexible in your style when you're coaching people, and all the educational tools you can get to help you learn a little bit more. But how can a leader ensure that they're shaping and kind of defining this comfortable yet productive environment? And what should you do if you find your environment isn't working for the team?
Yeah, this is an interesting question. There's really no perfect solution to this, to the environment. It's really dependent on the culture, team dynamics, and the leader themselves. I think the first thing that you always have to understand with the team is, what's the goal? What's the value you're trying to create? And don't forget about that. This is really the point of our work, right? We're trying to create some type of value. So make sure that that's kind of in the forefront. And then you really have to start thinking about culture. Is it like a formal culture, more informal, and more sprinting, more marathons, all these different metaphors, like what really, how would you describe the company and the people within? And then there's more practical aspects to it, right? There's, is the team fully remote, like my team? Is it completely in person in an office? Do they work more independently? Do they always want to work together? Really kind of see that and understand it. And then lastly, too, what is your leadership style? What kind of fits you? And putting that all together to make an environment that it works with the team. I'd say one of the most important pieces that we need to build is an environment that is very trusting and people are comfortable expressing themselves, and they're able to express themselves in a way that's really not offensive, to the rest of the group, that we can challenge each other. That's really when I've found the most synergy in those types of environments. But I can't stress enough, don't forget about the goal. What is the value we're trying to create? I think sometimes we can get caught up in this. We can get caught up in creating a great environment. We remember when millennials were coming into the workforce and everybody needed pool tables and bean bags and dogs running around the office. It's like if that's your culture, then fine, that's great. But I think a lot of people found that it wasn't really real, what they were trying to create. So don't forget about that. And in the end, it's treating people with respect and understanding that.
I think that's very fair. I think Rhonda even brought that up too. You want to make sure your culture is real and you don't want to get misled into thinking that you're joining a culture that would work for you and want to maybe actually work for you in the long run. Mm-hmm. Before our webinar, I actually got a couple of audience questions I've incorporated into our discussion. It sounds like some folks are really having some issues and want some solutions to some of the problems that they're experiencing. So I have this one question that I'd like to pose to you all. I think this time we'll start with Jonathan and Rhonda and Jake. If you have anything you'd like to add, please feel free to tack it on. But as we're talking a lot about company culture, one audience wanted to know how to talk to their manager about feeling excluded from your team. What's your best advice in one of those situations? How do you go about that tactfully, I guess?
Yeah. So the question is about excluded from the team that they're leading or team that they're a part of, in that their manager is leading. So let's start with the one where they feel excluded from the team that they're a part of, as in they're talking to their managers. I don't feel like I belong. And that's managing up. And managing up is a skill all of its own. And we should ask ourselves, why are we hesitant to talk to our manager? Why is managing up actually difficult to do? And it's often we feel like we're speaking to authority, to power. And I think we overplay that power. We do worry about it, and we have to remember as a manager that authority is a threat or an invisible power that we often don't recognize that we have, that other people are amplifying, and so they have trouble coming to us. So I guess if I'm speaking up to my manager, I would say, don't be quite as threatened by their authority of position that they're your boss. As you might be, and then talk to them. Like, when you do this behavior, giving them that feedback. When you do this behavior, this is how it makes me feel, which is excluded, and this is the impact that it has. I don't want to speak up in meetings, or I'm not able to collaborate with my other teammates. Now, if you're feeling excluded because you're the manager of a group that maybe you were a part of, and that's often happens, right? You were a part of the team and you were promoted to become the manager of that team, and you feel excluded. Oh, that's a real thing. I think we see quite a bit. And that's becoming that coach player. And I think that's a natural feeling, that you are now not their peer. You're not their buddy. You have to make different kinds of decisions. And too often when we feel excluded, we then tend to overplay that or overcompensate and really try to be everybody's buddy and be chummy. And I think that can become a dangerous thing. And it's worth having an honest conversation with the team that you're leading and say, all right, maybe one-on-one rather than all at once. That would be pretty nerve-wracking. But to just talk about what's our new relationship, at least at work. Maybe we can still hang out after work and do the things we used to do. But at work, how are we going to operate? And just have that conversation, and you just got to lean into it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Jake or Rhonda, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
I think go on, Jake.
I was just going to say, I think it's pretty well said there. So, good.
Yeah, I was just really going to say, I mean, communication is key, I think, and understanding, where does that exclusivity come from? I mean, is that a social, you feel socially excluded? Do you feel excluded from the business sense? I think really trying to do your homework first before you have that conversation and really understanding and have some examples ready, but then you've got to be able to communicate that with your manager. So the communication part is what's critical.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Actually, I lied, Alex. I do have one more comment. Just briefly, I do think it's important to remember that your team wants you to be a leader, and it can be a bit scary, and it naturally is, and won't make all the right decisions all the time, and that can be pretty tough. But I think it's important to really know that your team wants you to take on this leadership side of the role.
Perfect. No, I think that's a great thing to keep in mind, Jake and Rhonda. Communication is important. Your team wants you to be a leader and take on that role. It's fantastic to keep in mind. I have one more question for all of you. Again, as times are changing, what do you think the most important characteristic a leader could have or could work on right now? And Rhonda, I'll actually start with you this time, so that way you don't have to go last in the round and maybe talk around the circle.
Yeah. The two key things I jotted down as I was thinking about this is adaptability and listening skills, right? I think that's critical as we're making some of the generational changes in management and employees, right? But even having different personality styles that you're managing, if you can't be adaptable to some of those and to understand their point of view and where they may be coming from, it's going to be a struggle, right? So being adaptable and really listening to what your employees are saying, and that communication style is going to be key. Nobody wants a dictator or a micromanager to just tell them what to do. So those are my two tips.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Rhonda. Jake, do you have anything you want to add about characteristics leaders need?
Yeah, sure. I think it's important for a leader to really have very honest introspection. And which, understanding who you are, I think it's really the basis to working on yourself and understanding your leadership. You have to understand who you really are. On top of that, I would say empathy is quite important. Really try to put yourself in your team's seat and understand them and understand the problems they may have. And, also, separate the person from the problem and understand, like, okay, we can't get too emotional about these things, and to be able to really bring the team back down to here's the actual situation we have, and here's how we guide it towards a solution. I think these are being the calm in the storm can be really critical.
Thank you. And then Jonathan, do you have anything you want to add to it?
When you asked the question, I listed self-awareness, right? Knowing yourself, paying attention to yourself in every situation. So I'll spin it a little bit off of Jake's point and call it intentionality, that we're going to run into a lot of situations, particularly a lot of new situations as a manager. And you will learn and you will grow through every situation. But if we're intentional about saying, okay, what am I learning in this situation? What did I learn in this situation? So using some reflection, that intentional self-awareness of how you responded to a situation, maybe even how other people responded to the same situation, is how we learn with intentionality, and it changes the trajectory of our development. So I'll call it intentionality to sum it up.
I think that's perfect. Jonathan, I know one of your other favorite terms to use for leaders is the term resilience, and that a leader needs some of this resiliency in this day and age. Can you kind of define what that means a little bit more for us?
Sure. And resilience, Jake, isn't that just the topic of the upcoming ASTA Leadership Summit that we have in June?
I believe it is, Jonathan.
Yeah, right. So resilience. And so resilience is the ability to adapt to those challenging situations through our emotional and behavioral flexibility, that word again, in the, as we have new demands and new challenges come to us. So it's adapting to challenging situations. And facing demands and facing challenges ourselves and then guiding other people through it, that is the job of a manager. And so that's why resilience is such an important piece for managers. And so resilience isn't necessarily a skill, but resilience is a way of being, and it's something that I guess what we call a positive energy, that when we hit those situations, it's something we can tap into. It's a flexibility, it's an adaptability, it's a plasticity, it's a source of energy that it isn't a skill that you say, okay, I'm showing my resilient skill, this is what it looks like. It's something you build up, and that's through mindfulness, that's through exercise, good eating habits, good sleep, all of those things that we talk about, good mental health, good physical health, gives you the ability to take on a mental challenge in the same way that we take on a physical challenge. And so resiliency is that source of energy that we need to be flexible to manage all these changing situations and changing needs of people and new situations that we're going to run into.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jonathan. We've got a couple of minutes left, about 8 minutes left, and I think we have time to tackle our last 3 questions. But Jake, I loved recently ASTA hosted a panel at the Vegetable and Flower Conference to prep for the next ASTA Leadership Summit that we've mentioned a couple of times, all about working and managing a team of younger next generation employees. What is your best solution or suggestion, I guess, to working through this kind of generation turnover? And how do you think leaders can prepare and better understand the new generations they're going to help manage?
Yeah, I agree. That was a really fun panel, by the way, and the students were fantastic and really participative. I enjoyed it. To answer your question, I would start with saying, talk to them. Spend time with them. It's sometimes we get caught up in, we're seeing these different pieces on different generations, and these generations are like this or like that, and we start to build some confirmation bias behind that. I've had wonderful experiences with students over the past few years, and also with younger people that are new to the workforce. Hired some fantastic people that are new to the workforce. And so I'd really caution people, don't let your opinion be formed by others, who probably haven't spent the time to really talk, to these younger folks. That being said, I would also add that, young adults are really hungry for knowledge and wisdom. So don't be afraid to teach. It's the beginning of time. It's always really been necessary for those with experience to teach the new generation what they know, so that generation can stand on your shoulders and maybe do things a little bit differently, but also through what they've learned from you. So both of those things would be a good start.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jake. I think this other audience question I got before the webinar is actually going to kind of sound a little bit similar to that question. A gal in the seed sector was looking for advice. She mentioned, a common trend among new managers is that they're really excited, as Jake described, hungry to tackle change and big issues, but might be met with a brick wall from their upper management. She wanted to know, without being disrespectful or condescending, how do you gain that respect that to try and get the opportunity to try these new things and be met with grace at the same time? Rhonda, I might let you take a stab at this one and see if Jake or Jonathan have anything they'd like to add after.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I think a lot of times, new managers, they're excited. They have lots of great ideas, and the upper management sometimes doesn't want to let them spread their wings and fly as largely, as quickly as what they would want. So, I think it's just stepping back and understanding that, I don't want to squash your goals completely, but let's figure out how to tackle this in maybe smaller increments. I think a lot of times it's just the big initial change that's sometimes scary for those above them. But they're really excited to make changes. So it's, okay, if I can't get from point A to point B directly, what are some of the little steps I can take along the way to be able to eventually get there, or at least prove that what I'm trying to do is going to work, right? So that we can go on and take some of the bigger steps. So, I would think just try to start small and try to communicate that with your manager.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rhonda. Jonathan or Jake, did you have anything you wanted to add on to that one?
I think it's first of all, definitely agree with Rhonda on this. I also think it's important to, we talked about empathy and giving people benefit of the doubt with our team. We can also do this with our leadership, right? And it's important to, when you're thinking about approaching them, try to really put yourself in their shoes and understand, what are they really trying to achieve, right? And what are the hurdles that they have that are in front of them with this achievement? And what are the things that you can do to help with this endeavor? And if you can come with real solutions to the problems, they will begin to be open to new ideas. And really what you're doing there is you're building credibility. And the more credibility and trust that these leaders have in you, the more they're going to be willing to take on a risk with a new idea. And secondly, I would definitely agree with Rhonda on the size of the risk. Make sure you really understand that. Sometimes we're going to solve the world's problems and bet the farm, and it's really not necessary. So really understand the risk that you're taking with this new idea and relate that to the business in a very real way.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Jake. Jonathan, anything to add?
Yeah, I would say that when you're met with a brick wall, be curious. Respectfully ask why. What is in the decision, and really learn and hit it with a curious stance, not a defensive stance or an offensive stance, and learn from your supervisor, your manager. What is your job, as Jake just said. What are the problems you're trying to solve? What's the next level? And learn so that you can start to collect the tools, the experiences that you need to take on that kind of role.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. We have one last question before we wrap up for the day. I'm probably going to ask y'all to be a little brief on this one, but we've given a lot of advice here today. What do you think is the one most important thing managers should keep in mind in today's business world? Let's start with Jake, and then maybe we'll go Jonathan and give Rhonda the last word.
Oh, Alex, I struggle with brevity. I would say the biggest challenges are also the most rewarding solutions. When we think back to the things that we're proud of, it's not when times were easy, it's when times were challenging and we stood up to that challenge. So it's always important to remember, especially when times are difficult.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Jake. Yeah. Jonathan?
Keep your head up. And that has two meanings. One, keep your confidence up, by building your resilience. And the other one is keep your head up and pay attention to what's going on around you. Learn about the conditions and the context of the decisions being made in your organization.
Awesome. Thank you. And Rhonda, will end with you today.
Yeah, lastly, I would say, those are all good tips too, but, understand your culture. Make sure that you're hiring to it, make sure you're managing to it. Don't sell people on a culture that's on paper, but then it never actually adheres to those values. So, all of that goes into, being a successful manager.
Awesome. Thank you so much, all three of you. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I'm so excited to write the article that will go along with this conversation, but that's all the time we have today. One last big thank you to all of our panelists for joining us. And thank you to everyone who participated. We loved getting your questions before the webinar started. And we really hope that you found some of this information of value. If you liked this webinar, make sure to tune in next month. We're going to have another webinar on May 25th at 12 Central, the same time. We're going to take a bit of a different dive and talk a little bit more about how next-gen ag tech is advancing the seed sector. And then just one last reminder before you go today. If you missed any part of this webinar, don't worry, we'll be sending you a recording of it, and a recording of the webinar will be made available later at seedworld.com. So thank you so much again, everyone. We hope you have a terrific day. This is Alex Martin of Seed World signing off.